Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook? Welcome, Darren Newman, to the Fleet Geeks podcast. How are you doing today, mate? You all right?
Hi, Peter. I'm very well, thank you. Yes. Yeah. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. So, just before we went on air, you were saying that you think you might have picked up a bit of COVID at Brussels Airport, but you're getting over it now. How's it? Is it your first time you've had it, or have you had it before?
No, I'm an old timer. No, it's my second time. Yeah. So I think I got it probably on Tuesday coming through Brussels Airport. So I've had 2 days of sore throat, 2 days of that sort of weak feeling, and now a couple of days of snot. Hopefully it's behind me. So yeah, moving on.
It's becoming a bit prevalent again, isn't it? It's sort of back on the scene. COVID's popular again, and it's obviously doing the rounds. I haven't been offered another jab though, or anything. So I don't know whether they still do the jabbing thing or not. Who knows?
Don't know. Let's not go there.
Who knows? Anyway, on that note, we'll just talk about the injection of carbon literacy that we're looking to give listeners as they listen to this podcast. So to give listeners a little bit of context, obviously, Darren and I have done a podcast previously before on a Half Dozen Things podcast, which some of you will listen to. This one we're recording for Fleet Geeks. And Darren and I have partnered up on an exciting project through the Flagship Partners are going to be offering, which is a carbon literacy for transport operators training course. And it's an exciting opportunity. Darren recently, a couple of weeks ago, came and spoke about carbon literacy at the Transport Managers briefing, which was really well received. And I've had some fantastic feedback with people very excited to sort of learn more about stuff. But I guess sort of the first thing is we've got a course coming up in a month, and we're just going to have a bit more of a chat about what that is. But I guess the first question, Darren, is what got you interested in starting your business, Low Carbon Truck Consultancy?
I was working with alternative fuels at Volvo, sort of my last employed role, and I got quite interested. I've been in transport all my life. And been responsible, obviously, for putting quite a lot of diesel vehicles onto the road. And I got into that sort of alternative fuels with the Volvo gas vehicle, did all the sort of electrical training just prior to the launch of the Volvo EVs. And really, for me, it's the next stage of the industry, isn't it? It's where everything's going. It's where we're moving to. So, I had the opportunity to do a little bit of work. I liked working for myself, really. And now I've got my fingers in a lot of different sustainability sort of transport related pies. And I think the industry needs some help, in many different ways to understand some of the jargon. So my business is there to help SMEs, small businesses, transport people in the main, but I work with a few different organisations. I work with a think tank in Brussels on legislation. I work with an energy supplier. I do a bit of writing for Carbon Zero. So I kind of get involved in all aspects of transport decarbonisation. Many people look at it and think, oh, it just means one thing. It means electric, but there's a lot of things to learn. There's a lot of things we can do before we start spending money to minimise your impact on the environment. So, I understand this industry very well. I want to protect the environment from sort of the emissions of transport, but I also want to protect the transport industry from some of the more not crazy, but strict legislation that's coming along. And I just want to make sure that, there are as fewer casualties in our industry as possible in this transition, because I think, it has got the potential to spill some blood, for want of a better word. And, the industry is in a tight corner at the moment, I would say, with increasing costs and driver shortages. And, there's a lot of legislation. There's a lot of things going on in the industry. And as you know, it's a high capital, low margin type business. So mistakes are costly, very costly. So that's really.
You make a really good point there, mate. And I keep meaning to mention that you're like transport's answer to Greta, but without the condescension, right? I nearly referred to you during the transport managers briefing as Darren Greta Newman, but it's not really the same thing, is it? But the issue is that so there's a couple of things to pick up on there before we really talk about what the training is. There's a few key things to pick up there. There's a bit of a stigma around this stuff, isn't there? Particularly with Greta. Like when I look through my social media, there's a real adverse reaction, particularly from people in the sector, towards the environmental challenges we face and those challenges. I think most of the people recognise that there's a challenge, that there is a problem to deal with, but they're a bit averse to exploring new opportunities. But I think the worst thing is that they don't like being dictated to and being told to do stuff. So that's the first thing that I wanted to pick up on. So don't let me forget about that. And then the other is that, we are in a very uncertain and challenging time. We've just seen, as we record this, we've just seen Knights of Old, 500-600 vehicles, something like that, which is obviously very challenging. There's a very challenging economic environment or backdrop to some of these challenges. And like you say, with high capital expenditure and high capital investment with very low margins for return, and potentially even squeezing those with some of this investment, there isn't very much room for error at all, is there? So people do need to get the best information, the best consultancy they can to make sure that they're making well-informed decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just going back to your first point, I think you're right. There's a lot of people. It's a spectrum, isn't it? So on one end, you have the sort of fanatics, scaremongers, and people that are just, we have to degrowth, we have to stop doing everything, we have to go back to sort of living hunter-gatherer lifestyles almost. And then at the other end, which hand did I use before? That one. And at the other end, you've got people that are in complete denial. But I think the vast majority of people are somewhere in the middle. They're more rational. They know there's a problem. They know something's got to be done. But what no one can afford to do is rush into this and spend lots of money and put yourself out of business, because that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help solve any of the problems. And it creates more problems than it solves. So, I'm not overly political with this stuff. I'm not even overly sort of a doom monger about, the future. And I think, people have got to get some perspective on this. But, there are plenty of things you can do which don't cost the earth. But for me, it's more about arming people with the understanding, the terminology, the language, the landscape, so that people can have a conversation with their customers and understand some of these things, know what they are talking about. Could we use the word carbon an awful lot, don't we? It represents a lot of different things, and people get confused between harmful tailpipe emissions, which are pollutants and harmful to health, but they're not bad for the environment or for the global warming. And then you have things that are really bad for the atmosphere and the planet and help or contribute towards global warming, but they're not poisonous or pollutants. So people get quite confused because an exhaust tailpipe has a whole load of chemicals coming out of it, and people are a little bit confused about what is what's been measured, what legislation controls each of these different emissions. And this, for me, it's trying to put some clarity around that subject so people can converse with their customers, with their suppliers, and understand where their impacts are, what can be done, what can't be done, and what the obligations and legislation is around it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's when I was listening to you speak about the subject at the transport manager briefing, it harked back to a really interesting application of science, but in the transport sector. So we are really very much looking at, and I think people don't really realise the difference. But as you were just saying, there some light bulbs will have gone off around carbon and around pollutants and around the air that we breathe and the sort of challenges that we're facing. So if I sort of get into the crux of it, so the learning objectives, for the carbon literacy. So, well, first of all, carbon literacy for fleet operators, the starting point is there's the carbon literacy project, isn't there, which is sort of the underwriting or the people that are underwriting and supporting the development of the course. So tell me a bit about the carbon literacy project first, Darren.
The Carbon Literacy Project are an organisation. They're based in Manchester, and they're involved with training generally the public around carbon literacy. So, and they've partnered with several different organisations to try to develop courses within certain fields of specialisation as well. And that's kind of where I tied up with them. I had actually started creating a course because I thought there was some value before I'd even heard of the Carbon Literacy Project. But I came across them, looked at what they were doing, enrolled myself. I went on a carbon literacy course, and then I thought it's a good introduction to the whole topic. So I then decided I was going to get my own course certified. So my course is certified through the Carbon Literacy Project, but it's got a particular slant on transport, trucks, and commercial haulage. So far, they've trained 72,452 individuals. They've got 236 certified training professionals, about 6,000 organisations, 500 odd courses. So it's growing and growing and growing, and they're partnering with all sorts of people in all sorts of different sectors to try and expand it out. But what it does mean is it's a common qualification. It's a recognised sort of certificate that you get at the end of it. So the course starts what is climate, talks about climate science, talks about how global warming occurs, what different compounds and chemicals and emissions actually affect it. And then we go more into how trucks and transport actually contribute as well. So we talk about what things come out of a tailpipe, why we're looking at zero tailpipe emissions, where are other emissions within a typical truck and transport operation, because obviously everything is not just from the vehicle. You've got your lighting, your heating, your own supply chains as well. So we go into what the impact of transport is on the climate. Then we look at all of the different things you can do to impact this, and it starts with the really simple things like improving efficiency, and then we go through all the different technical solutions which are out there. But we talk about tires, we talk about telematics, we talk about driver training, but we also talk about electric trucks, we talk about hydrogen, we talk about gas, we talk about biofuels and HVO, and all of those things. And we look at the costs, we look at the benefits, we look at the carbon savings. Then we go into carbon reporting. Who comes under that legislation? What the legislation controls, what the targets and the deadlines and the milestones are going into the future to hit net zero at 2050. And it gives people a flavour, and it gives people the tools they need really to understand their own carbon footprint. And it shows you how to set a baseline for your business. It shows you what to measure, how to get the information. How do you know how much CO2 comes from a litre of diesel, for example? How do you know what impacts your other energy uses are having on the environment? And it gives you a way to track those over time, and it looks about putting plans in place to how you can reduce them over time. So it's about getting a baseline, understanding what your emissions are, because what we see happening quite a lot is environmental legislation tends to work from the top down. So the biggest companies are impacted. They're having to do carbon reporting. There's a number of other schemes that they're sort of dragged into for legal reasons. But the SMEs and the smaller people don't necessarily have that obligation to report their carbon emissions. But what we're finding more and more is where small operators or medium-sized operators are working for larger companies, those larger companies do come under the legislation. So often they're getting a knock on the door, or they're getting a phone call or an email to say, right, I'm embarking on a net zero journey. I'm working internally within my business, but obviously you're one of my suppliers, so I'd like to talk to you about this. And the course really gives them the language, it gives them the tools, it gives them the understanding of the legislation, so that when that call comes or that email comes, they're in a position to answer it, and they can say, yeah, this is where I am, this is where I'm going, this is my impact, I understand it, and I'm a valued partner, really, because that's what this is about, isn't it? It's about, keeping those relationships with your customers and your suppliers, and making sure that you can provide the information that they need when they come to the point of doing their own net zero planning. So really, it's about helping people with those conversations.
Hello, it's Shani from Flagship Partners. We are really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. If you need expert advice or training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We are really excited to announce the launch of our Transport Manager Academy. With expert development for fleet leaders, we offer fully accredited initial Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher, and operator license awareness training, as well as mentoring, support, and professional development beyond the qualification. Our vision is to develop elite fleet professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing that I got. That was my key takeaway from your session at the Transport Managers briefing, is that this all seems a long way off for operators, but actually the reality is that no matter the size of your transport or fleet business, you are part of the supply chain and part of someone else's supply chain. And there's certainly this requirement for larger organizations to do their carbon reporting, and your carbon fits part of that. So one challenge you have is you need to understand what they're talking about. When companies come to you and ask for this information, you need to understand it. And secondly, it'd be good if you've got some level of measurement or how to measure it, as well as the key thing is, when people think, well, what's in it for me? The thing is they're going to learn, I'm looking at the learning objectives on my screen now. They're going to learn the science of climate change and carbon and the impacts and effects of that, understanding transport emissions, which includes alternative fuels and looking at the new modern technologies coming in, reducing carbon in transport operations, and then understanding their influence over that as well. But finally, they get this plan, don't they? So tell us a bit more about the plan side, which is basically their sort of takeaway that they take from the course at the other end.
But there's two elements of it. One is and again, it's a peer-to-peer course, so it's people are going to be with people in similar situations to themselves. So there'll be other professional transport people. So it's shared and group learning as well, because nobody's an expert in all of this stuff, and I think we could learn as much from our peers as we can from anywhere else. So it's how to create a decarbonisation plan. How can you track? How can you monitor? And how can you what things you need to do? And that starts not with spreadsheets and calculators. That starts with a first question: why are we doing this? Are we doing it for environmental reasons? Are we doing it for business reasons? Are we doing it for legislative reasons? There's a number of reasons why you might want to do this, but at some point, everybody's going to get sucked in, if that's the right word. And today, as I said, carbon reporting starts at the biggest companies, but over time that will come down. And there will be a time in the future where annually everyone is submitting carbon reports like they do with their financial accounts. Whether the company's house will be the place that gets logged or not. But we will get to a position where, if anybody wants to know your carbon footprint as a business, they'll be able to go online and they'll be able to find out. And they can then determine if they want to partner with you and work with you as a supplier. So, those are the sort of things around creating a plan. But the other part of the carbon literacy project, which they encourage, is for everybody that goes on the course to have some degree of action themselves. So at the end of the course, we ask delegates to create an action plan, have an assessment of what impact that's going to have. That goes off to the carbon literacy project people. They will assess it, and basically it's a pass or fail, and that's required to get your certificate. So and what we do there is, if there's an owner of a business, then you could expect that person to have quite a lot of influence, quite a lot of clout, and you would expect a relatively significant effort made by someone like that. But if a transport manager comes in who's worked for a much bigger organization, has got less control and less influence, then a plan equivalent to the level of influence they have in the business. And again, even if drivers come on the course or other people, so that, we want people to take action that's commensurate with the position and the influence they have. And we talk about how to influence people, how to get things involved, because for me, the stark reality of all of this is, there's targets, there's pledges, there's legislation, but if you add all of those together, it doesn't get us far enough. So there's still more to do, and that comes from voluntary action, from the public, from companies, from organisations who want to go a little bit further and faster than the legislation dictates they do. So there is a gap there between what the legislation and the guidelines and the pledges entail, and what we actually need to do as a species to limit warming as far as possible. So it's about what can I do, and the course really helps people with that question. And as I say, we like to see some commitment. We like to see an action plan. We like to just see people picking one or two things that they can influence within their role, that's going to sort of go towards the greater good, if you like. So that's the sort of requirement of the program. So yeah, hopefully, when delegates go through it, they'll have a good understanding of what's possible. They'll have a good understanding of where to start. They can have a good go at putting all of their own emissions down and set themselves a baseline, because if you want to measure anything, you've got to know where you're going to start measuring from, and that baseline becomes your sort of base into the future, which you can then sort of mark yourself against. And as I said before, it's not all about spending money, but it's about getting the right processes, getting the right thinking in place, and working towards a long-term objective. And there are some things that I would recommend that everybody starts today, because there are some awfully long timescales in some of this. So, if you want to electrify your fleet at some point in the future, long before that happens, you have to understand what energy requirement your fleet has, what charging requirement your fleet has, and also what energy your site has, because that's a big stumbling block in terms of getting enough energy to people's sites for the future of electrification. So even if you think, well, I'm not ready for this and I don't need to for maybe 5, 10, 15 or whatever time frame that is, there are certain things that you ought to be doing today, just so that when that time comes, you're prepared, you're ready, and you don't hit a brick wall basically, with a district network operator saying to you, you've got a 4-year waiting list now before we can connect you up to any more power. That's the last thing you want to hear when you've got vehicles on order. So there are things, and you have to plan them out in the correct order. But as I say, this is not all about spending money. It's about understanding the language, understanding the environment, and being able to be literate, literally literate in the whole topic.
Fantastic. I was going to say there's lots of benefits there, isn't there, around the learning that people are going to get to take away, and then also the advanced planning. I'm starting to think about those infrastructure elements that you're talking about, which is potentially, it feels like a long way in the future. But as you say, this isn't, in the industry, we're so used to having mandatory training and training that we're forced to have through CPC and that kind of stuff. This is absolutely voluntary for people, and it's one of those that we would suggest is an investment. Please excuse the dogs in the background. I can hear squeaking toys, and it will let you cough as well. But it probably draws me to a conclusion anyway, because I think we've done a really good job of covering the key elements of this training. And what I would say is, as part of the show notes, we're going to put the link to our website page with more information about the course and how to book. It's coming up on the 8th of November, and we'd really love to see more people booked on it. We've got a few on there already, and we're looking to really make sure that it's at max capacity and we sell the house out, because it's just a really exciting opportunity. And I believe we're one of the first training providers to be offering a course of this type, and it will give learners an opportunity to really start to lead the way as well in the industry as well, and for them to really improve on their literacy as well. So Darren, is there any sort of final thoughts from you before we sign off?
No, but just to confirm what you said there, there's a few people doing this in the car sector, but this is the only sort of carbon literacy certified course with the recognised qualification for commercial truck and van operators that there is out there. So for me, it's a great start to get you onto that road And it's as you said, the more people we can get on the course, the more shared experience and the more everyone can learn. So it's really a group activity, I would say.
Absolutely. Darren, thanks for taking the time out to come and have a chat with me, particularly after having suffered from COVID as well. So really appreciate that, and hope you continue to get better. Listeners, if you've got any questions, if you've got anything you'd like to ask, please do drop us a line and we'd be more than happy to help support that. Thank you for having a listen, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.